Okay, so this is the type of video that I would probably need the script because I've already had to re-record like 4 times. But I'm not going to. I have like a basic script. So just bear with me as we go through this little deal here. I've been asked by a lot of people, how do you win defensive battles? Which is a good question. And I guess 2 points that I want to just, 3 points I'll just throw out there really quick. One, it helps if you spend gold. I mean, there's no getting around it. It really does help. Two, you're just kind of not likely to win without your AI getting lucky. Or you just completely outstat the other guy, like you're totally in the wrong division. You know, if you're in silver like a weekend, but you're normally an adamantium player with a strong armory, well then you're just gonna win every defensive battle and you'll be pushed out of silver. And for number 3, there's really only a handful of characters that really do well because the way the AI is handled is kind of crappy. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to look through a couple of the team types. Because you have to, for the most part, have a team type, but you can kind of get around that with certain characters. So I'm going to start with those characters first. So let's just take a look at one of the more likely choices for a defensive team. So if you're going full on defense, like power defense, you're going to want Colossus. I mean, there's just no getting around that. Well, you could get around it with some other people, but he's probably one of the best choices. And the only reason why is because his Phoenix 5 costume just has a really insane passive that self-heals and helps his team take less damage. He's resistant to psychic. He's resistant to tons of things. You know, he's not like Karuth resistant, but he's still very resistant. And when his protect's on and he has the Bruiser Elite EISO, which you shouldn't put anything else on him, honestly, other than that. And which also means he's your primary tank. But once you do that, he won't stop protecting as long as he actually gets his turn. And he'll probably get his turn unless you stun him or something like that. His skills, though, are extremely lacking, so everybody else on your team needs to be something that actually dishes out a lot of damage. And honestly, at this point in time, I don't really see too much of anything specific that works really well with him. But there's other people that you could just fit into a team with him, and you could probably do pretty well. Like, generally, you would see one of the worthies. So I guess I'll just go ahead and list them, although that's not the order that I had them written down. But that would be a good transition because that's who you're going to see. So, no, okay, so there's a bunch of worthies, obviously. It's not just a couple, but there's only a couple that you can actually use. Oh, 3. So, Null is the one that you guys are probably most familiar with. He's kind of made a return thanks to changes to magic warding. You know, he is capable of protecting, so he can use Bruiser Elite if you want, but it's not mandatory. You can also put something like the bring yourself back to life, but don't use Luke Cage's specific EISO, the knuckle up, because he actually doesn't get that, so it's a waste of your time. But he's immune to bleeds, resistant to crits, and immune to burning, chilled, fear, poison, radiation, so that's really strong. It's just part of being a worthy, just being resistant to all of that stuff. Meteor Swarm is corny. You know, when you put stacks of Meteor Swarm on people, they're just bound to blow up unless they can kill Luke Cage really fast. And now there's really nothing they can do to stop it. This skill is decent, although Dark Energy Blade will stop it, so do not put your lethal on this skill ever, because you should run him with somebody else who can prevent healing. These skills, personally, I don't really care what you put on these. Like, you can apply, well, this already applies wide open. I mean, this, You can do whatever you want, honestly. I think you'll be fine with maybe incapacitation for this skill, because this is his preemptive counter. You could get that to come out, pretty often. This one might be interesting. It applies flanked. I haven't seen anyone using that, but I'm sure it's pretty good. I mean, it's flanked. You can't really go wrong. Well, yeah, that's pretty much it. He's pretty basic. When it comes to damage dealers, he's somebody that doesn't require a strong armory to actually do high damage. He just needs to get meteors on you. And honestly, you could pair him up with anybody magic, or you could swap somebody the magic with the E-ISO if you have the Mystic one. See if I have a... I know I haven't, so it's one of those general ones that you could have gotten a while ago. All your attacks become magic. And honestly, if you put that on himself, that could be useful, but you will run into issues with Angrier if you do that. So we're just going to go ahead and talk about him next, because he's worth talking about. So, oh, and run Null Bruiser, don't run him anything else. So Angrier, I would say, is one of those characters you could run him either. I mean, it really just doesn't matter. Like, this one will get more damage, this one will get more counterattacks, but you always risk of being absorbed when you counterattack, because it's his melee skill, so, not too enthusiastic about that. But he has passive dot damage reduction, which isn't listed, which I still don't know why. But he counters magic and fire attacks. He nullifies magic attacks, which is really corny. And he heals himself all the time when he attacks. And he attacks a lot. I mean, it's pretty much... he just keeps going and going and going. And, this skill is not going to be used on defense. Like, I never see the AI actually do that. Which I don't even see them really use the cloak. I think I see them use it, like, on rare occasion, but normally they don't do that. The heal, I think they'll try to do that if you're low, but they don't even really try to do that often either. The heal is, pretty standard, except, it's got the remove and prevent debuffs. And, counters attacks. Well, that's nice. These skills are the ones that you really gotta watch out for. So, this one on defense, he likes to do these summons, and he'll usually just spam them repeatedly. Purged is about the corniest thing you could ever put on somebody. Because it's pretty much just free damage and your class bonuses are gone. So it doesn't matter what class he is. He's just only going to get the benefits, and he's never going to take the penalties, because he's going to blast people with this, and it's a summon attack, so you can't even counter it. And if you already have Doom, you take a big chunk of damage, and then when you remove this, you take another big chunk of damage, because that sounds okay. Although, I don't think either one will actually kill you, but you're probably dotted and poisoned and crazy stuff like that also, so you just kind of have to deal with all that at once. And it's just base, just normally a quick action. Then you have this skill. This has the Malignant Poison, which is the biggest problem. Oh, and this is also AoE. But, this is stealthy, so of course he's going to bypass your protects. But you have to worry about the Malignant Poison on this skill. The Bane is just kind of meh, who cares? But, when you get Malignant Poison, you can't heal anymore. And it has a chance to spread to allies. So if you don't have like a techno-organic endoskeleton, or I guess since we're talking about putting this on your defensive team, if the attacker doesn't, or they don't have any sort of poison-resistant people or things like that, their whole team can get wrecked by this. And notice that these just have 1 round cooldowns. I mean, he can just keep doing these, and probably will, except for this one. Which, this one is probably one of the most messed up ones, because he hits you with this, your teammates get possessed, and once again, if you're not immune to the psychic effects, you're screwed. 70% of the time. But I've had it, like, get all of my teammates, and not my agent, because my agent has a techno-organic endoskeleton, which I think almost everybody should run on offense at this point. kind of becoming mandatory because you don't want to bleed to death. You don't want to be poisoned by this guy. You don't want to be possessed by this guy. You don't want to be mind controlled. You don't want to be feared. You don't want to be this. I mean, like, it's so stupid. But this doesn't do any damage, and it actually does have a cooldown. I mean, it's not something that you can just keep doing. But just the fact that you lose your turn when you're possessed, and you swing at your teammate, that really sucks. And it sounds like it would be good for Phantom X and his E-ISO, but you know, no one's using Phantom X. That's pretty much all we have to say about him. Now, the issues that we still have are, of course, with Karuth. So, I would run her Bruiser on defense, because I don't trust Scrapper on offense. I run her Scrapper now just because it's a little bit more convenient to take out, you know, priority targets. So her E-ISO choices, I mean, she has a lot. So you can, if you want to keep her debuffs on for a long period of time, because let's face it, like if you put Rune of Fear on people, they're screwed. You want to consider Back for More, you know, the Resurrection, or any of her personal ones are decent. Except for the one on the mind that buffs her mind control. I don't think that one's that great. But the 100% chance to counter is good. The Rune Breaker is alright. Or Rune Keeper. And if you're really afraid of, like for example, static teams, which is where I'm going to go after this, then you want to take Shock Foil. And Shock Foil is pretty much, if you're against the static team, you won. I mean, they just can't kill you anymore. So this skill just does a lot of damage, and you want to get her Exploit Stun and Delirium ISO because that's just corny. Her damage on this is high, yes it is. So when you add the fact that you're exploiting, you know, Delirium isn't hard to get on somebody, you know, because she has a Delirium skill, and you know, Possess counts, Disoriented, Mind Control. You know, anything that Enchantress puts on, so she can actually work extremely well with Enchantress, because she'll just punch everybody to pieces. But you gotta hope her AI actually does that. Normally her AI will use these skills sometimes, but it will almost always start out with this. What you want to put on this skill is the lethal E-ISO. A-ISO. Because lethal applies Despair, and then you have Despair and Rune of Fear on a subtle debuff, and Dark Energy Blade does not affect her, so there's no way you can stop her from doing it. It's just too bad, so sad. This I just like to make stealthy so that she can actually hit whoever she needs to. And sometimes she'll use this, but not too often. So, since we just talked about Shock Foil and static teams, we're just going to move over to Beta Ray Bill and the static teams. So, these guys are annoying because they almost always will have Beta Ray Bill on their team. Because he's the primary static guy. And he protects. He starts out with a damage increase and an avoidance effect, so if you don't have a way of getting around that, then you kind of have to deal with a full team avoidance effect for, like, I think 1 or 2 turns. It's kind of annoying. He's Blaster and Bruiser. Both of those classes are extremely good, so that's pretty dangerous. And his E-ISO, which I unfortunately do not have, allows him to follow up his attacks with an extra, like, lightning strike that will proc static. And the thing about Beta Ray Bill that really makes him great is the fact that this skill is something he normally starts to fight with. And static and ozone together on a catastrophic attack that shields him is just amazing. The rest of his skills are honestly not terribly interesting. And the AI will normally do this, which if you're flying, you're toast. And if you have any electric debuffs, which you should because it's beta ray build, then you're toast. I mean, this will honestly just kill you. Straight out. Especially if it's like your bruiser tank agent, you have a good chance of just losing him to that immediately. All of his attacks are electric, so they all will proc static. And honestly, it doesn't really matter what you pick for his AISOs, in my opinion. Because everything he does, it's really only these two skills that are worth anything, so I guess increase the damage on this to help you have a high chance of killing. And, yeah, that's about it. I mean, he's pretty basic. You probably, like any static team you run, you're going to want him, is pretty much what I'm saying. Storm is sitting there, but she can't run with beta ray build. So that's bad, so we're just going to skip over her, because she's okay for offense. Static teams, if you like run her and Victor, but I don't think that's really good on defense. Excuse me, I'm still sick, which really sucks. So, Thor is another great choice, and you're going to run any of the blaster costumes you can find. You know, you could run, like, well, not regular Avengers. Don't run that. Doesn't exist. Not the Scrapper. Looking through his costumes. So modern Thor isn't bad because starting with 2 stacks of might, he'll throw his hammer and probably just blow you up. But you could always, you know, inspire bravery, because he'll do that every turn at the start, and then he'll either summon thunder or hammer throw. Normally, I see him hammer throw. Age of Ultron is pretty good because he can't be debuffed on the first turn. And if he does summon thunder, it turns it back on. That's pretty good. But overall, his skills actually seriously lack effects. His AISO will give him the ability to apply static charge and makes this lightning, which is good. Or electricity. But other than that, he's normally not electric type. This is electric. And he has an AISO that makes his Inspire Bravery. I think it's an AISO. It might be an EISO, so don't go Wikipedia it. But his Inspire Bravery with one of those will actually apply static charge to the enemy team, which is really good for a second shot at doing it, just in case you didn't get it, like, or they cleansed it or something like that. You always have to worry about that, but the main thing about Thor is just the fact that his hammer throw will blow you up. That's really useful. So then, Victor be here. So Victor is one of those people that they choose because he's surprisingly durable, and sometimes he just doesn't die. So if your opponent doesn't have, or if the attacker doesn't have despair, then they don't know what's really going to happen when they actually try to kill him. He could just come back repeatedly and just be a major pain. His class is good. You know, if he's 15, he'll be getting his free counterattacks, and he'll be proccing static every time he attacks you. His Dragon Claw is what he'll pretty much be attacking you with on his counterattack. You know, if you're magnetized, you're crit, and he has the ability to just magnetize you. And apply downgrade, which keeps you magnetized, you know, even if you try to remove it. The fact that downgrade disables technology turns off things like the cube and the weather control device, which are pretty much the two main things people are cleansing themselves with now. No one really uses the Scroll of Angelob. Nobody uses Orsera being Homage. Everyone forgot what Orsera being Homage was, so we don't even have to worry about its existence. He'll sometimes shield himself, which that kind of sucks. You don't really want him to do that. And Zapper, if he for some reason decides to do that, and you have a techno-organic endoskeleton, you are stunned. So, it's like the one time you don't want to be mechanical. So he is pretty much the counter mechanical guy. Like, there's only a few people who even have this. It's like him, Vision, and Black Panther, I think, and I can't think of anybody else at the top of my head who has fried circuits, but it's not something that you really see very often. Really sorry about sniffling, but I'm, you know, been sick for like a week. It's crazy. Alright, and of course, I mean, if I really have to explain anything for this guy at this point. E-ISOs for Victor. Of course, the Infiltrator E-ISO. And I'd say almost anything that you want. I mean, he's not one of those guys that needs anything terribly specific to work. But he has his own E-ISO, which starts him off with static cling and his shield. So that probably would be a good bet. So let's go to Electro. So of course, it gains Volt. And I'm pretty sure Volt just increases the damage of electric attacks. I have to double check. You know, check the wiki. He takes less damage from other static type characters, which is great. And, you know, I guess if someone does run him in a Sinister Six team, which I haven't seen a single one of those. But if they do that, then he'll give them an extra turn. So, generally, I don't see a lot of him on defense. But I figure he can work, because I do remember he will surge himself. I don't remember him ever using Supercharge, but he will pretty much use all his other skills. And, honestly, as long as you make this catastrophic, you can do whatever you want on this. I would gear it for the buff, not the debuff, if you have him on defense. I just put aiming here because... no real reason. I mean, I guess it just boosts his damage. And just damage on his last skill, because you honestly just wanted it to hit hard. Because it hits hard as it is, so making it hit harder will pretty much guarantee that it's just going to kill its target. So that's the main goal of that skill. He's mainly one of those guys that just kills stuff. He does it well. So that ends the static teams, and then you got where are you at? Pestilence. I personally just don't feel like he's that great, but I just keep seeing him. So I'm going to talk about him anyways. I personally wouldn't run him, but that's up to you. You know, if you run him, debuffs can't be removed. That's cool. But it can't be removed from either side. You know, you have a chance of applying the debuffs from yourself to the enemy. That's cool. And your team takes less dot damage, which actually makes him kind of anti-static. Now, you can't remove static, but you're taking less damage from it, so that's actually kind of useful. He has an E-ISO that you could probably not bother with, because he's always going to attack. Repeatedly. So... and his class honestly doesn't matter either. You pretty much just put on whatever you want. Generally, I would say probably have him start with a shield, because you kind of just want him to survive. Or... jeez. I don't know, survival training? I mean, there's really nothing fantastic to put on him that I can think of. You know, if you have him Infiltrator, then you can put on... well, you shouldn't, because you'll have Enchantress, probably. Yeah, Protective. I mean... Energizing might be alright. Maybe. And as for his skills, He's one of those guys where it really doesn't matter either. It's kind of personal preference. Like, this is slashing. You can have it ignore defense if you want. But the type of team that you have here, it might be worth your time to, if you could get into utility type debuffs, like maybe have it apply flanked or something. Because he's not really going to be doing a lot of damage most of the time. And it's kind of because of the armory that you need to run with him. And I'll get to armories before I finish, because I've already forgot to do that. This skill, you probably won't even see the AI use, because the fights don't get that far. But this skill you should probably put on lethal. Now, of course, Dark Energy Blade could stop you. Probably will. That sucks. Just gotta deal with it. It's unfortunately how it works. Then you get Enchantress, who is also pretty common. I mean, she's pretty much back to the way she was. For E-ISOs, the magic one that heals her and the infiltrator elite, or not elite, covert, I think is what it's called. Covert E-ISO are the choices that you want to do, because you want her to, keep her health up, and you want her to just spam dots and debuffs. Because honestly, she's not about pure damage. Like, the only thing that she can do that does pure damage is this, and she's not always doing that. But it exploits everything that she does, so it's really corny. These skills, she will spam continuously. So, one of these needs to have thorns, and honestly, I don't think I would even put anything on the other one. I guess you could just put thorn on both. I mean, there's really not that many options. This increases the cooldown. You don't want that. That increases the cooldown. That doesn't. This is useless because it's already subtle. Dependable? I mean, I don't know. There's really nothing else you can really put on her. When it comes to her first skill, this is pretty much what she's going to be spamming, almost all the time. Because she's an infiltrator, and you can just, the AI will just get her class bonus. It's smart enough to do that every time. You don't even have to worry about turning that on. You could put on Shield Breaker, so that she'll just Shield Breaker everybody she hits. That could be useful. But past that, I don't think there's anything that's particularly great. That is not slashing. But apparently it will take it. I'd be skeptical, because I haven't seen anyone doing that. I don't know if that works or not. It might be able to be put on and then not work or something like that. I know there's some of them that do that. And this skill, I guess you could just throw on damage or catastrophic. Oh, just damage. Once again, you don't have to worry about it being blocked, and it's all about the damage on that skill anyway. She's pretty much, as you know, just going to disorient the other team, make them attack each other, and if she doesn't blow up immediately, she makes the battles long and unfun, and honestly, sometimes she can just outlast them with her own healing. But, despair is all over the place now, so you probably won't even get that much healing. You might not. So the last block I want to mention is the really hyper offensive type teams. So for these guys, we have Star-Lord, wherever he is. So he's going to be one of the... So there's two slots for these guys. There's the support, and then there's the main damage. So here are the supports. So Star-Lord, pretty much he has chances to grab extra turns and morale boost to teammates. Like pretty much on every action that happens. And people have chances to join in and they get stat buffs boost. So that's really good. But I'm sure you guys have seen this guy before. His utility is just nuts. Cornered and impaired on all enemies. And these are all these are gun attacks, so if you have the hair trigger that makes him follow up on attacks, then you want that. If you don't have that, then the blaster ISO is just fine. Or any ISO, honestly. I mean, probably one of those two if you have them, but definitely you should have at least one of those. Yeah, so Impaired and Cornered is really good, and spamming Rising Up eventually will get strengthened on your attacker, and if it does, then you pretty much will blow everything up. I mean, that's just amazing. His Trick Shot, he kind of does from time to time. It's okay. This skill normally does tons of damage if you set up right. That has really good debuffs and it's stealthy. And with Hair Trigger, you will even get a follow-up on that. And he honestly likes to use Lit Up to kill people. If people are low, he will try to Fatal Blow you. His AI is actually pretty smart. Like, it'll actually try to use his skills somewhat effectively, unlike a lot of the AIs in this game. So, you know, you definitely want to consider him for your team. And just on a quick consideration, if for some reason you only have Psylocke, you could do her too. You would need to have the one where you start with the fight with mental coordination. I mean, there's no other option. Hopefully you have the one where her telekinetic katana is a quick action. And for the rest of these, you could start out with manifesting here, because this will actually allow everyone to get a crit, like, just out the box. She uses her kinetic shield when people are severely hurt, pretty much all the time. And she just kind of randomly uses her psychic knives. But her damage is actually pretty high. She's stealthy and melee. But being stealthy is really good, and having True Strike, I mean, that's, you know, stuff that you can't really go wrong with. But she's not quite as good as Star-Lord, because you can just wipe out mental coordination. You can't wipe out Star-Lord's buff unless you kill him. So, as for the two offensive people to those teams, we of course have Quicksilver. Most people now run him Age of Ultron for the Protect, but you can also still run him, you know, the blue costume. I mean, I guess that's just what it's called. His preemptive counter is still really strong, and Age of Ultron, the only difference is he protects, and he'll also interrupt melee attacks. The interrupting melee attacks is actually pretty strong. So that could be a good consideration, because when you look at teams, they have Dark Energy Blades on them, which counter ranged and debuff, and then you have him counter melee. That covers a lot of bases. But he's always going to go first, and he's always just going to do a lot of damage, and he also comes in Blaster too, so that's always a choice. You may want to run him Blaster, or you may want to run Scrapper. It's up to you. I don't really know. I guess Blaster seems better because there's more likely to be Bruiser Protects. But, yeah. It's really... The thing about him is his armory is what's going to carry him. So for his skills, you know, you should take Wide Open on the tag team. Or you could probably take the flanked one now, because that'll help everybody get follow-ups, and everyone on these types of teams are definitely about the damage, so if everyone's following up, you're probably just disintegrating people back to back. So that's also a consideration. This skill, most people put on Exploit Combos. That seems like the most reasonable thing, because this applies combos, and especially if you're a Scrapper, you're going to get it anyway. These two skills, I guess, just add damage to this, because he's not really going to use that often, and this, I guess you could make it catastrophic so it won't be blocked, but, I mean, I don't imagine the AI, if it uses this, that's just kind of bad, so it's kind of scary when it does that. You don't really want it to do that. And the other choice, who I actually think is better, is Spitfire. And just like Quicksilver, she does a lot of damage, except she also heals. She can't, her attacks can't be interrupted, and she has a chance to get allies to join in on single target attacks. So that's all really powerful, but the main thing is she's more sustained because she can heal herself, and she applies bleeds and disoriented. So that's pretty crazy. So you'll see her, you know, she's all stealthy too, just like Quicksilver. Well, Quicksilver's mostly stealthy. She's actually all stealthy, like every skill, you know, it's not going to be blocked. Her damage output is really high, you know, with the right armory. And for the most part, you can probably get vampiric on this skill, and it'll open wounds, so that's really good. I think... Did I add that to it? I might have added that to it. Let me see. Okay, yeah, you probably want to add bleeding to this skill, because there's a lot of characters who, you know, she works off of bleeds to begin with, but you know, that's the main thing she works with, so you probably want to add that. You could add wide open instead, just for raw damage, so it's up to you if you want raw damage or if you want bleeds. Either one is probably alright. This skill, I honestly just put on chance to hit, because you just want it to hit when she's going for it. And this skill, you could put on extra damage or Vorpal to ignore defense, because when she does this, it's probably going to be like a complete knockout, like you hit them with that and they're just out. So that's always something you want to consider. And that's all the characters. Okay, well that's pretty much it. Oh, sorry, ISOs. Did I go over them for everybody? I think I did, except for her. The Scrapper ISO, so whatever that one's called. Yeah, the combatant. Because you don't want her to be winded, you don't want her melee to be locked out, definitely. And increased chance of critical hit is amazing. And then you get, you know, extra damage on when you continue the melee, because she's literally just going to continue the melee. I mean, she doesn't do anything else. Alright, so this video is already going on a bit long, but I am going to keep going. So I hope you're just listening to this in the background or something like that, or I guess you could watch, because I actually am showing stuff. But the second thing, I guess, would be, before we get to the armory, I want to get to the agents. The agents are honestly pretty key to your team, and on defense, there's certain things that you just kind of need. So, weather control device, the AI kind of randomly uses things, but they're good things. Like, there's nothing really in there that's bad. So that's not a bad idea to have on your team. The Dark Energy Blade is good. Pretty much universally, unless you just don't want your agent to protect. And I guess we have to work through specific teams. So, like, let's say you're running a defensive team. There's always things like, let's go through this gear. The Staff of Asclepios, which is pretty much the best healing item in the game, like pure healing, because it gives you healing over time and increased amounts of healing on your entire team. So you can't really go wrong with that for a defensive team. You just have to watch out for Despair, of course. Some people still like Raft Shank. You probably don't have one of these unless you've been playing for a long time and you got it in the gold sale. You know, having combo breaker is good, but where is it? What most people have for combo breaker is the hammer pistol, which requires 2 parts of the set. So that is also a good choice, because combo breaker is something you really can't go wrong with. Of course, I mean, Grace Note is just overall good. Exploit web, exploit stun, preemptive attack, exploit opportunity. I mean, and apply web. That's enough to honestly, like, sometimes if it just procs too many times, the other guy will just lose because they'll lose all their damage. Especially if you're running somebody like Beast and they just can't remove webs, then they're just kind of stuck with it. You could still run the Hexenjäger if you want for the magic warding, but I think most people don't run that anymore. Let me just check, because I don't want to go there yet. Oh, yeah, this is pretty much amazing. On either side, offense or defense. This is, of course, you know, Scroll of Riddermarath. That's great. But if you just don't want your agent affected by the vast majority of super annoying debuffs that people apply, you want a Techno-Organic Endoskeleton. Okay, I think that's pretty much it for the general gear. So, you know, most of the time you're going to be running the Agent Bruiser. If he's protecting, you want him to have Elite. If you're not having him protect, then honestly it's up to you what class you want to run. Most people don't run Generalists. You know, just kind of feel out what your team needs. Like, if your team doesn't have a Blaster, make him Blaster. You know, that's pretty obvious. Give him some sort of high damaging weapon. Let him do his thing. This suit is good. The Bruiser E3 suit is good. Bruiser Safeguard is good. And pretty much Blaster anything would be alright. So Blaster Safeguard, so he can't be impaired. This suit, so he can just give himself... Like, if you have anything with deadly crits, and you just want to make sure it deadly crits, you want this armor with the Blaster EISO installed. And I don't see a lot of people running Infiltrator. And if you really just want a combo breaker in a suit, you'll take this. But seriously, you probably really just want to have your agent tank. That's pretty much what all of them do nowadays. On offense and defense. So this or Bruiser E3. So when we look at teams, so like when you run a static team, there's a couple pieces of gear that are also really helpful. So we will do like Thunderstrike. You take less damage from electricity. You you counterattack enemies that do electric attacks or enemies that have static charge on them. And this even applies static charge. So when you run somebody like Beta Ray Bill, that's almost mandatory. And Magnetic Pulse Cannon, you know, you have to risk the AI using it because this doesn't have any automatic functions, but it's stealthy. So if your AI does choose to use it, you know, it'll be really effective. Any type of shielding gear, especially the ones that you get from the daily missions, a lot of that free action stuff, most of that is good. It's, for worthy teams, pretty much anything I've listed that's not static based is good. You could signpost to help keep your agent alive a little bit. There's one of those weapons, the Ionic something or other. I think it's Ionic Emitter. Don't quote me on that, use the wiki, but it's one of those weapons that applies to spare and it's AoE and it's something you can just equip to your agent. That's really good. A lot of times it's just mainly finding things that work well with your team, but then you get like, okay, so I guess it's easier to work with Quicksilver and stuff. So this will pretty much be the end. So the Relentless Rapier is something that you're going to want to run with Quick Lord all the time. Like any of those heavy offense teams, you're going to want to run this. You know, the counter, the follow-ups are great. The brutal strikes is enough to kill anybody. And the damage is really high. And you may want to even take extra parts of the set to boost the damage. That way the follow-ups definitely kill. It's really strong. Cosmic Cardinal, if you have that, damage is still good. I mean, it's not as high as the Relentless Rapier, but it helps keep stamina up, and now stamina is actually something that you you could actually run out of, thanks to changes in the stamina system, which I understand why they did that. It's kind of silly. If you run anybody Age of Ultron, like if you run Age of Ultron Thor, which is the only person who I listed who is Age of Ultron in the whole thing, this would be a decent choice for you. This is also electric and applies radiation, but it gives you the Quicksilver. This is also a good choice for him. If you run this with Quicksilver, you have two people who have a chance to stop melee. If you run this with Thor, then your agent and Thor will be covered from debuffs on the first turn. And I think this is a little bit more valuable on Quicksilver than it is on Thor, because the preemptive melee counter, along with the Dark Energy Blade, is just going to be nuts. And you're going to get the first turn unless they have somebody like Loki or Spitfire or Quicksilver as well. So that's actually a really huge advantage. Or Blade. I think he's still glitched to where if you have the E-ISO, he gets like insane turns. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Oh, sorry, the armories. So, anything you run with Colossus, you really want to focus heavily on the defense. So, when you look here, it tells you what you get for each stat. So, the offensive bonus gives you attack and accuracy, the defensive bonus gives you health, defense, and evasion. So, when you have a defensive team, the one thing that's really unfortunate is that you do have to actually spec out your defensive armory to work with that specific team. And if you don't, it's probably just never going to win. And that's sad. Now, when it comes to most of the static teams and worthies, you can go middle of the road and be safe. And even a little bit with Pestilence and Enchantress. But when it comes to things with Colossus generally, like if you mix Colossus and worthies, like let's say you ran Colossus Angrier, or Colossus Karuth, or Colossus any of the worthies, honestly, because he just kind of works well with all of them. If you run that, you're going to want to run as heavy into the defense as you can, because your attack stats aren't useful in that fight. What's useful is Colossus making sure everyone's safe. Your agent, probably doing some debuffs and covering the team a little bit himself, maybe doing some heals, but he's not really going to be doing a whole bunch. What you really want is Angrier to disable the enemy team, make them lose a lot of health, because he's going to be doing percentage-based damage. And you just want to screw them over with as much percentage-based stuff as you possibly can with Angrier, or you want to just completely disable them with Karuth, and no matter what your armory looks like, if she blows up a rune on you, you're probably going to die. And Null's Meteors are just percentage-based of your health. There's nothing you can do to resist those, you're just going to die. That's how the game works. So, defensive armories for them. If you just run the worthies without Colossus, then you can run middle of the road or defensive. If you run a static team, if it has Electro or Thor, I would say run offensive or middle of the road. If it has Victor, I would say run middle of the road or defensive. If you have Pestilence and Enchantress, you have to run full defensive. because they're just kind of like the worthies, where they're just about wearing you down and surviving themselves rather than just straight up hitting you. Now, when it comes to the hyper offensive types that I was just talking about, Quicksilver, Spitfire, Psylocke, Star-Lord, your only choice is full offensive. And if you do anything else, they're never going to win a battle, probably. Outside of, like, Silver. And you may even want to consider, shuffling your hero bonuses, too, when you're considering these teams. But the whole thing with the hyper-offensive teams is that their whole goal is to kill someone immediately or have someone so close to death that they're going to die the next hit. And Spitfire can accomplish that, especially with an agent that's set up, correctly. He can really just, destroy people in one turn. I've seen people, sometimes you can lose 2 people in one turn to a team that has no survivability, but you just can't fight back because you've already been blown up. You've lost people before you even got to move. It's really pretty much just being cheap and just knocking them out before they have a chance. It's corny, but it works. And that's the thing. You just want to do what works. And I guess the last tip I really have, and after this I'm done, but look at what you lose to on defense. Pay attention to what you fight often, and if you struggle against it, and that'll give you an idea of what other people go through, because your experience isn't going to be totally different from absolutely everybody else. There's always going to be somebody running a team similar to yours, maybe the same team as yours. And I even have a lot of times on defense, when I switch to a more serious team where I fight the exact same team as mine. So take notes, figure out the meta, feel it out, and honestly just copy other people. That's pretty much, everything that I've explained is something I've seen people do before. And use what you have. If you don't have Null, but you have Karuth and Angrier somehow, use them. Don't stress out over Null if you don't have them. Don't stress out over Electro if you don't have them. There's somebody there that's one of these teams you can use. Like, you might have Star-Lord and Quicksilver at least. At the very least. You could do that. And that's not, high in the CP cost or anything like that. It would be pretty simple for you to get your hands on it, run with it, and, you may have to spend some gold on the armory. You just got to get over that. But if you really, really, really want to win your defensive battles, you got to do it. But you don't have to win defensive battles to win Adamantium. I'll tell you that right now. I lose like 90%, 95% probably of my defensive battles, and I get Adamantium every time. It's mainly just pushing yourself well above Adamantium offensive battles to the point where you get to about 2,000 where everybody else relaxes and stops trying hard. But don't ever be sitting on the line within like 2 or 3 days. Like between Vibranium and Adamantium. That's dangerous. That's asking to be stressed out. That sucks. But alright, I've been going on for 53 minutes, so I hope this was somehow helpful to somebody, because explaining defensive teams is difficult, time-consuming, and if you have any other additional tips, leave them in the comments to this video, leave them in the comments on the Facebook groups I posted in, and just share what you can with other people. And if you have the ability, I just use Open Broadcaster to record videos. Some people use Bandicam and stuff like that. Record other people's matches from your group and show them what it looks like. Just give them an idea, hey, this is what your team is doing. You may want to swap this guy out or do this or that. Alright, now I'm out. Good luck, and hopefully you'll win a couple. I mean, if you win like even 2 or 3, you ought to be happy. Let's be real.